What is the most horrific thing that someone has told you super casually? Coach bus driver was like, sorry, the bus was late guys. The traffic was caused by someone who committed suicide by walking into traffic. Looks at one of the passengers getting off the bus. You remember the blood skid marks, right? All of us who were waiting at the bus station were like, WTF. Guy said it like he sees it every day or something. I was on a date with this girl and we drove by a fast food joint and a shared parking lot. She deadpan said, "My mom used to park here and shoot heroin with her BF while me and my brother sat in the backseat." Me. Oh. Wow. I was a heroin baby. My mom was using while she was pregnant. Me. Oh. I once asked my grandfather, "How you doing, grandpa?" And he said, "Not good. Not good. I moved my bowels 3 times already today. Went to the doctors and they put a tube in my penis." Should I mention we were at a family funeral? I called my cousin and at the beginning of the convo I asked what she was doing. She said, "Oh, just standing at the counter looking at my hand." I thought it was a little weird, but my cousin is a little weird, so I forgot about it. Anyway, half an hour later she goes, "A blood has now stained my shirt. I think I should hang up and go to the ER." I was like, "What?" So she replied, "Oh, I stabbed myself with the meat cleaver 10 minutes before you called and the knife is still in my hand. I'm fine, but my shirt is now ruined." A couple of years ago I was on one of those music festival cruises. I was sitting down waiting on my friends to finish their drinks and whatnot when this lady sits down next to me. Somehow we get to talking about dogs. I tell her about mine. She tells me that hers is a comfort dog. I didn't ask her to elaborate because it wasn't any of my business. But she tells me it's because she didn't leave her house for 5 years. Again. I didn't ask why. She went on to tell me, a perfect stranger who'd been talking to her for all of 5 minutes, that her ex-boyfriend was stalking her and broke into her house, so she had to shoot him and kill him. Lawyer here. I was representing a teenage boy charged with molesting a younger relative. His mother told me, "What's the big deal? I was molested as a kid and it didn't hurt me." Supervisor dead like, WTF? Really? Poor guy and his wife had a stillborn. That he was going to prison for burning down a church. I had seen this guy about 10 times since the supposed accident. We were all hanging out and he said, "Guess what?" and that was that. Edit. This happened in South Texas for anyone wondering. Edit. And I'll add that he tried to gouge his girlfriend's eyes out. Burned down her house and killed her 2 dogs. This guy had never raised his voice once. This was seriously out of left field. Edit. Goddamn guys. I never realized how many church arsonists there were. When I was 20 something back in the 90s, I was sitting on the front steps of my condo waiting for my sister's husband to pick me up. Nice old fellow. A tenant of my building. Sat down next to me. His first sentence he'd ever spoken to me was, "Did you hear that they're taking my testicles off on Thursday?" I responded that I had not. He continued, "Yep. Don't use them much anymore after the MRS died." Mercifully at that moment my brother-in-law drove up. My therapist told me how she ran 2 people over, killing one and paralyzing the other, during our first meeting. Dude whipped out a picture from his suit. It was of a naked woman spread eagle on a bear rug. He said girls will do all sorts of things for a quick buck and if interested, we could go in for a photo shoot. Never met him before or since. He was like showing me his favorite pet. I was joking with an acquaintance once and he told me that he was going to move in a couple of months. We weren't really close enough for me to care, but I asked him why out of pure curiosity. In the same breath, without hesitation, he told me that he had been in the foster system all his life despite knowing his biological dad personally. His dad was some big businessman in New York City and didn't have the time to raise a son. He had been with 11 different families in 15 years and in each one he prayed he'd get adopted. It never happened. The family that he was with at that moment told him they were thinking about adopting him but changed their minds last minute. Now he's in a constant state of expecting to move because he just assumes that no one will ever want to adopt him. I hope you're doing good, Michael. They border on impulses and I often feel like I'm being pulled towards them. I walked out on a date in the middle of a movie because I couldn't stop thinking about strangling her. To be fair, we were at a mental hospital. They randomly told me details about them being molested. In the middle of our first date. My roommate and I are casually playing video games. Third roommate enters. Man. Don't you guys hate it when you poop a bunch of blood? We don't poop blood. Really? You don't poop and have some blood come out every once in a while? Bro, you need to go to the doctor. Apparently it was just a hemorrhoid, but still. When I was in college, there was this guy who would hang around me sometimes that seemed just a little bit off. But he was nice and we both had similar interests, so we hung out. One day, after I hadn't seen him for weeks, he tells me it's because the police were interviewing him. He tells me this story. Him and his two friends were in the woods, shooting a .22 pistol. Friend number 3 tries to fire and it doesn't go off. Friend number 3 looks into the barrel to check the gun. The gun then goes off, firing the round in there. And then the next round, shooting him twice in the face. You read that correctly. 3 guys went into the woods with a .22 pistol. 2 walked out. But since Guy and friend number 2 both had the same story, and the cops had no way to prove otherwise, no charges were filed. I stopped hanging out with that guy. Forever. I was working construction with this older guy who was telling me about his dream to open a car detailing shop. As the conversation continued, he revealed that he couldn't for something like 10 years because he killed someone drinking and driving and had just gotten out of prison. He was working really hard at getting to a better place, but in the last few years I've seen him around town drunk. I hope you can find your way back to that dream, Billy. Taxi driver was a jerk, bragging about how he had taken advantage of a drunk girl he picked up in the party zone of the city. It was the most uncomfortable taxi ride of my life. Offered to kill someone for me and admitted to previous murder. I was ranting to my grandfather how much I hated the abusive scumbag guy my mom was dating. And my grandfather, completely sincerely, offered to shoot him for me. He casually told me about how he'd shot and killed my grandmother's first husband in the 60s and gotten away with it. And how even if he did get caught at his age, he didn't give a frick about prison. My grandmother's first husband's death was insanely suspicious, and I have no doubt in my mind he was telling the truth. It's been commonly held family legend for years that he was murdered. Common, needless to say. I did not take him up on this offer. A neighbor told me how she was suicidal at one point and almost drove herself and her kid into a lake. Then she tried to convert me to her religion. A guy I worked with said that in the late 80s he lived with 5 other guys in an apartment in New York. Sometime after the HIV test is developed, all of the roommates agree to get tested. Apparently the results were mailed to them. Basically, one guy got the mail and opened everyone's test. In so doing, he finds out one of the roommates has HIV. He shows the test results to every roommate except the guy who is HIV positive. Then they destroy the test results. They all pack their stuff and abandon apartment and the HIV positive guy. None of them ever spoke to the HIV positive roommate again. They never told him his test results. The guy I worked with laughed so hard telling me this story. It's fricked up. The guy I worked with had no remorse or a second of compassion even 30 years later, and knowing the HIV positive roommate probably died. Who knows how many people the unknowing HIV positive guy may have unknowingly transmitted HIV to before he had serious symptoms. JP. If you're reading this, frick you. Heartless bastard. Guy in high school tells me he was kidnapped and buried in a box. It was in the news all summer, like 14-year-old dude kidnapped and found by hunters buried in the woods. Guy shows up freshman year, it was freaking him. I was on a date with a girl and everything was going okay. Not amazing, but definitely still in the range of a second date. At some point, the conversation wasn't even sexual. She said that one of her favorite memories was regularly letting an older guy tie her up in the backseat and drive around, sharing her with random people off the street when she was 15. It was at that point I decided there would not be a second date. Edit. The conclusion that I bailed because I immediately viewed her as damaged goods or whatever is completely off base. There was other behavior to suggest she needed help from someone qualified to do it, and I felt that it wouldn't be healthy for either of us to pursue a relationship together. Also, it seems like there's a few predators around here that need to get the frick out. An acquaintance in high school casually told me that she lost her virginity by being gangbanged by her uncles. It was horrific then, and as an adult, it's even more horrific now. That poor fricking girl. After a week of testing when I was 14, the doctor walked in, said, "You have lupus and about 6 months." Handed me a prescription for 1 month's worth of prednisone and walked out. That was, incidentally, 24 years ago last month. He wasn't wrong about the lupus, but he was about the 6 months. Still, seriously fricked up thing to tell a kid like that. My therapist casually explained how he had to fight off a psychotic patient who was attempting to gauge out his eyes, the therapist's not his own, and succeeded in popping one out, and that's why it seemed like he was looking in 2 directions at once. One of his eyes was glass. Thanks for sharing, doc. The 28th of December 2018. I received a phone call from my father's surgeon at about 3 AM. Went something like this. "Is this my name?" "It is." "This is Dr. Ziz. I'm calling in regards to your father. Does he have any other children or a wife?" "No wife, but 2 other children. Can you get them here?" "I think so. Why do you ask?" "Well, he's not doing so well and I don't think he's going to make it. My father had an allergic reaction to a blood thinner they used during one of his surgeries. This had caused clotting in the surgery area, which led to portions of his intestines to start to go necrotic within his body and leak intestinal fluid. This is known as sepsis and is highly deadly, 40-60% mortality rate. Dad lived. Took 5 more life-saving surgeries and 3 months in the hospital, but he's still here breaking my balls on a daily basis." Oh, I accidentally did this recently. I was telling my boyfriend about how this girl I knew stalked me in October-November of last year. I hardly knew her, but she sent me some really aggressive and threatening messages, and would get really angry if I didn't answer her immediately. She actually non-consensually kissed a friend of mine and harassed another. After a few days of this, I cut contact with her and blocked her. After telling my boyfriend all this, he said something like, "Well, if she tries anything like that again, you could beat her up." And I just said, "Oh, no need to worry about that. She's dead now." Obviously complete shock on his face. I really should have led up to that better. Basically, I found out she had passed away in February for completely unrelated reasons. It really shook me up for a few days. But like I said, I didn't really know her. Of course, saying it the way I did was pretty callous of me. Middle-aged dude here. The amount of child abuse my peers went through. How casual they are about. And that they lament the fact that they can't do it to their kids. In my institute, a couple of girls of 16 laughed that they had thrown another girl over the bridge with her hair on fire, and that made the girl's father commit suicide. Nobody cared that they shouted it in class while laughing. There was even the teacher. Edit. I'm from Spain. It's a normal institute and this was with 15. The girls were in drugs and alcohol, and no, it's sad, but anyone do anything. I didn't even know the name of the girl that suffered this. And no, it wasn't in the news. Overheard some guy talking to his friend on his phone while waiting for coffee. I don't know, man. She said she didn't feel like it. But I thought if I just started anyway she'd get into it. All she did was cry the whole time. So I left. I once had a customer who was an RN tell me I've changed patients' charts because the doctor didn't know what they were doing. My brother and I don't get on because he sexually abused me as a child. Oh my god. I've never told anyone that before. That was hell of a first date. There wasn't a second. Her choice.
Hi there. Look, if you enjoyed the video, well, why not go ahead and hit that like and subscribe to Reddit Stories. In fact, if you want to see even more responses to this thread, well then, take a look. There's the link in the description below. And remember, show some love to those authors while you're there. And I look forward to seeing you next time.